Dun & Bradstreet is a 175-year-old company in the B2B space. It's an iconic company. 4 presidents have worked at Dun & Bradstreet, a very prestigious place. And I did have the great challenge, an exciting challenge with my peers of transforming and modernizing Dun & Bradstreet. And I did leverage a lot of concepts from Lean in order to do that. And that's ultimately the focus of my talk today. So Lean works great for startups, and that's where we're very comfortable with Lean methodology. You know, I like to think that it also works well with large enterprises. The only difference is that large enterprises have a slightly different set of what I call initial conditions, for those of you who are engineers. Okay, they're kind of big. Large enterprises clearly operate on a very big scale. So when you're trying to transform a big enterprise, you can't do something small. So you can't just do it for one single product or on a small scale, because you will not materially move the company, because the company operates on such a large and global scale. Secondly, people are generally risk averse in large companies. And that's why Lean works so beautifully in large companies. Because people generally will get penalized for taking big risks, or they're just not used to being able to take a lot of risk. And thirdly, the famous one, bureaucracy. Every big company has it, no matter how great the company is. Tons of layers, really complex processes, takes a long time to get things done. So those were the kind of challenges that I was looking at with my peers in order to transform Dun & Bradstreet. So let me tell you a little bit about the context in which I was focused on this transformation. A new CEO was put in place in October of 2013. Before he came in, the company was not growing. He was brought in really to drive top-level growth for Dun & Bradstreet. Because Dun & Bradstreet is in the data and analytics business, and all of you know that that's an industry that's growing tremendously. He made 2 initial hires on his executive team. One, a chief marketing officer, that's me, and 2, a chief people officer. Now, why were those his first 2 hires? He knew that brand and culture were the fundamental basis for any transformation. And if you look at those initial conditions I described, so much of it has to be attacked by looking at your culture strategy and your brand strategy and doing it together. So when I came in, I really looked at this transformation in 3 main buckets. And I applied Lean methodologies to all 3 buckets. First and foremost, as I mentioned earlier, I was dealing with a complex set of initial conditions, as I like to call them now. And I made that term up this morning, so hope it sticks. And that was really around creating the right brand and culture for the company. Because the company was risk averse, was bureaucratic, and did move slowly at the time. Now, what that focused on was around making it clear what the purpose of the company is, what the values of the company are to create the culture to enable the change we needed, as well as the creative manifestation of that change. The big thing here was that I did this hand in hand with our chief people officer, because we saw culture, brand, change, transformation as inextricably linked. Secondly, once we attacked those set of initial conditions, we revamped our go-to-market strategy. And actually, before I go into that, the brand and culture change we did in an extremely compressed time frame. We did that in less than 8 months, which for an iconic big global company is virtually reckless. And the reason, and the way we did it was that compressed time frame forced us to operate fast to talk to a lot of customers, float things in front of them, and then optimize very quickly. And forced us not to over-research things. Because those of you who've been through this type of work know that if you try to appease everyone, you get something that's completely watered down, right? So, you want to create a culture, but you don't want your value to be integrity, because that's a lame value, because that goes without saying, that you should have integrity, or teamwork, or, because, it's like, if it goes without saying, then you don't need to talk about it, don't say it, right? You needed values that are authentic to the company, you needed purposes that were authentic to the company, and you needed messaging that's authentic. Even though we did it fast, even though we applied lean and were very agile in the way we did it, the numbers were through the roof. Customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, was 75% plus, which if you get 50%, you're happy. Customers felt more connected, they believed in the brand, believed in the direction, and employee surveys went up tremendously in terms of people's happiness. With that, we focused secondly on our go-to-market strategy. And again, classic Silicon Valley type story, we were a company that was very product and feature and technology focused. We really focused on taking our brand and making it more about the personas that we went after and the verticals that we went after. We changed our go-to-market approach completely for the entire enterprise, oriented around the pain points that our customers felt. Again, very compressed time frame. And we did that by one persona at a time. We picked our first persona, we launched it on a small scale with a subset of salespeople, then we launched it on a bigger scale, we learned what worked and what didn't work, then launched the next one and the next one. Now, once we had a branded culture, again, less than 8 months, we changed the culture completely, and we had a go-to-market strategy that was less than 6 months. Then we said, okay, now it's time to really focus on top-line growth for the company. Now you can imagine that this is a little bit of a counterintuitive strategy, not in retrospect, but at the time. Because when you are brought in to transform a company to drive growth, the first thing most people focus on is the engine. Drive demand gen, buy a lot of media, get your technology in place, do a lot like that, get into tactical execution to drive growth. The problem is that works when you're a lean startup or you're applying lean methodologies to a startup when you don't have to deal with those initial conditions. But I did, right? And for those of you who just joined, initial conditions were scale, bureaucracy, risk aversion. Because what I found very quickly is that no matter how great your engine is that you create, if you don't have something to put in it that's interesting, that customers care about, and you don't have a culture that supports taking the risk to put stuff into that machine, and you have huge bureaucracy, you just won't get the results, especially in the current digital world where customers are inundated with stuff. So that's why I focus first and foremost, transforming culture, transforming go-to-market, and then driving the third piece, which is pipeline. Now, it takes a lot of, at a big company to take this approach, it takes a lot of nerve. Because I was, the board, the executive team really wants you to focus on the third piece first. But we as a team decided that culture and brand were the most important thing, and that would provide the basis for everything else. So I could talk to you for an hour or more on all three of these boxes and how we apply lean. And I can do that in the Q&A a little bit more. But what I want to focus on is one example of how we did that in the third box, and how we applied lean-like methodologies to really drive scale in an environment where we were going through big transformation. So where do we start? We have this great brand, purpose, values, etc. We have this great go-to-market strategy. But how do we very quickly start to drive top-line revenue from that? And we said, okay, what does lean tell us? Let's start with one account, just one account. That's why I titled the presentation. And we had this concept in lean of minimal viable product. And I asked the question, well, what if we looked at a minimum viable prospect? And we started with that one prospect. And we took everything that we believe in from the first box, the brand work, what we believe in from the second box, which is the outside-in, persona-based approach to dealing with the pain points of our customers, and just did it for one account. Picked the right account that had big opportunity and, most importantly, the methodology that we could learn from. Then do the next 3, next 10, next 100, next 1,000. And demonstrate success and incrementally start investing that way. And that's exactly what we did. But the big question is, how did we actually select those initial set of accounts? That first account, the first 10. The beauty is, in a large company, in the modern world, we have technology, analytics, digital, to be able to shrink the complexity in our ability to do that. And although technology is not a substitute for culture, it does help you make decisions very quickly in a large company, really cut through all the bureaucracy and all the process. So I'm going to get a little geeky for a little bit, but I think for most of you this will not be geeky. So what did we do? Because I do want to get a little bit geeky because this kind of shows how important technology plays in applying lean at a big company. So we started looking at our data. And we started saying, okay, let's look at our data and decide who that minimal viable prospect will be, or who those first 10 minimum viable prospects will be. At the most basic level, we looked at our data and started segmenting it. And we segmented it by our go-to-market strategy. Secondly, we said, okay, we don't want to select those accounts solely based on this vertical or whatever, but we wanted to actually use predictive modeling to say, where are these companies going? Because we wanted to work with companies that were growing that we could learn with as well in this lean methodology. And third, we did a lot of what we call lookalike modeling. And this is one of the advantages of being a big company, is that in these initial conditions, you already have a set of accounts you work with. Take a look at the accounts where you're doing well. Find another 2, 3, 10 accounts who are exactly like those initial accounts. Assess the opportunity, and then start to go after them. Because you know, with this lookalike modeling, that there's big opportunity. So I didn't want to get too geeky, but the theme that I want to say is that now, in a big company, technology can help you, data can help you really get very focused in how you approach lean methodology and how you prioritize who you go after. And that's exactly what we did. And that's exactly, these are data names. These aren't real companies. And that's exactly what we did, was we used our analytics, used our data to really prioritize our accounts and really figure out who we were going to go after first to learn. And it wasn't just about learning, but it was also about communicating to the rest of the company this new way of approaching customers and new way of driving our company and our company's success. We started with a handful of accounts, 10, and then we started expanding from there very quickly. And what we did was we said, okay, we have this great go-to-market messaging. Now there are all these tactics that we can employ with our potential accounts to actually move the needle and relay our new approach, our new messaging, our new brand. Now it would have been easy for us to start to just build content, which is the non-lean approach, or the fat approach, I guess. Which is, okay, this is great. We have a new brand, we have a new go-to-market. I am just going to start creating white papers. I'm going to start creating online models. I'm going to run all these webinars. I'm going to run all this content. But that's not what we did. Like, that's the old way of approaching this, and that's the bureaucratic way. And then kind of spray it out there and hope people look at it and hope it moves the needle. Spray and pray, as many of you marketers would use. Instead, what we did was we said, okay, we've identified the right set of accounts using analytics. We've identified the opportunities within those accounts. Now, and this is again very non-intuitive for a big company, let's create custom material for that account, leveraging all the stuff that we've done in the first 2 phases of our transformation. And let's see what happens. And we built content for that one account or those 10 accounts based on where they were in their process with us. And then as we move them down the process, we increase the intensity of those materials. So what do I mean by that? Initially, we may just do the typical thing of focus all our attention on getting into that account, whether meeting them at an event, hitting them with the right content digitally, which now we can do, leveraging our LinkedIn network to get into those accounts, or those 10 accounts. But with that focus, we could go full force into those accounts. Then as we moved down the process, then we started building the material that attack those accounts' problems, right? Custom for that account. Then as we got more and more into those accounts, we'll do more and more intense stuff, like we'll actually show up and do a custom workshop at the customer site. Again, custom for that one account or those 10 accounts or whatever phase we were in. And then we may actually start to build case studies about that account. We'll do ROI modeling. We'll get more and more deeper into account and do more and more deep custom work. Now again, what this allowed us to do is both validate and learn, as most of you know is the lean methodology, from those accounts, and then optimize it for the next 10 accounts that we prioritize, and on and on. But more importantly, it does another thing. And this is a complex slide, I'll walk through it. It actually creates an incredible learning opportunity for the company, and it's actually had a bigger impact than I expected. So going into this process, I thought, hey, we'll pick the 10 accounts or 20 accounts or wherever we were, and we'll employ the tactics, and we'll see which ones move pipeline and which ones drive revenue. In actuality, when you're in this B2B world, all of this stuff matters in your learning, and all of this stuff matters in the communication within the company to get the investment to expand this transformation. So what do I mean by that? Some of this stuff takes a while to recognize. So it may take, depending on the account, it may take 6 months for you to realize revenue. But, you can employ tactics right now. So for some accounts, simply getting in them and simply getting the right people in the room was enough to get people within the company excited, to get people around this new transformation, this new messaging, and really get things going. The second thing that's critical with these minimal viable prospects, and again, this is, I believe, part of the methodology, is we created great stories. Stories that we could tell inside the corporation as well as outside to the board, to investors, to show that this new brand, this new go-to-market approach actually works. And again, I was not showing pipeline, I was not showing revenue, I was just telling stories. This large telecom company, we did a day-long workshop around this new thing that we're doing as part of our transformation, and this is who showed up, and this is what happened next, and this is why it worked. Again, I didn't anticipate this, but simply telling those stories about how this new approach was helping these accounts, and we were getting the right people in the room and engaging in a different level of conversation, made a huge difference in galvanizing the company to start to invest more in this new transformed approach. And it, again, shortens the speed at which we transform the company. Obviously, as you move down the process and more time goes by, you get, you can get an understanding of customer satisfaction. So we started surveying as we moved, as time went on, we started surveying customers and seeing how that moved. Eventually, we started seeing pipeline, and eventually, we started seeing revenue. But keeping that portfolio of numbers, tactics, stories all together helps you succeed in kind of applying lean in a big company and expanding and getting people around what you're trying to do from a transformation standpoint. Yes?
How did you position the new offering to the new customers? Were they aware that it was part of a non-core offering, or how was it positioned with them?
We actually started with, we didn't even start with the offering. So the go-to-market approach started first with the persona and said, okay, if you're, for example, a chief marketing officer or in the marketing department, here are the pains that you have. And we focused first, and that was part of the transformation, on the pains that that person has, got them along, demonstrated that we knew their pain and we could help them, and then we got to the products at the end. So the products, it was less about the products and more about addressing the pain points. So it was a solution-oriented sale. So again, the product was, it was less of a product orientation, at least initially. But good question, because lean is often applied to products, and this is a little bit of a different approach. Then another thing that we did was, as I went through this process and started seeing this stuff working, I started scaling all these tactics. So for example, stories. I actually, as we got into the process and started moving down with a larger number of accounts, I actually challenged the company and challenged the salespeople and the marketing people to say, let's build 100 new studies, 100 new stories in 100 days, right? Again, programmatically scaling these measurements and these communications around the company so that the whole company understood what was working, and so that we got the investment and commitment to do the next 20 accounts. So again, you could programmatically scale every one of these measurements to really move things forward. And that's essentially what we started doing and started scaling the accounts. So start with one account, go to the next 10, go to the next 100, see what's working, see what's not working, look at the numbers. When we're getting a lot of great stories or a lot of great pipeline, start to scale that and programmatically scale that, communicate it internally, get everyone galvanized around it, and drive it. So again, applying this lean methodology where we're really focusing on a small set experimenting really accelerates the transformation versus the traditional approach of we have a new brand, let's spend a bunch of money, buy a bunch of Wall Street Journal articles and commercial spots, and hope that people will look at it and come. And the whole transformation has had a big impact on the company in a few different ways. Clearly, I mentioned the culture. The culture has had a radical shift in a very short amount of time. As I mentioned, the numbers improved more than any benchmark that we've seen around the world. Customer satisfaction scores, all those kind of things we looked at to see the impact. But secondly, and most importantly, the company has grown. So when we started this process a couple years ago, since then the stock price has gone up. The company's grown when the company wasn't growing. Investors are happier, customers are happier. And so again, it's just the beginning. It's only a couple years in a many, many year journey. But the indicators are so positive at this point that the whole company is very galvanized around the transformation and is passionate about making it work. And that's the most important thing, is really transforming, again, those initial conditions. Get the train going, and then the machine just keeps going. So, to sum up, and I want to leave lots of room for questions, lots of time for questions. Here are the kind of 4 big things that I would say we learned through this process. Number 1, you have to tackle the initial conditions, which again, for the new people who came in, bureaucracy, whatever you're facing, whether it's a bureaucracy, risk, a lack of risk-taking, you're a big scale company, whatever it is, bad culture, whatever you're facing, you have to tackle that first. You can't immediately move into execution and all those things until you tackle that. And that's one of the biggest differences between lean startup and applying lean to an enterprise transformation. Secondly, if you're working at a big company, many times you're forced to think at a big scale. Again, traditional approach to changing a brand is you change the brand, you spend another $20 million on advertising, or whatever the equivalent is for this, given the size of your company. And this kind of flips the approach using lean and says, first and foremost, let's start tiny without scale, demonstrate success, tell those stories, and then scale. Thirdly, again, technology doesn't substitute your culture, but technology, data, analytics sure helps cut through all the bureaucracy that you face in a big company to transform it. And nothing is more powerful than actually leveraging the data you have in the company to make your decisions. Fourthly, measurement is a big piece of this. And telling those stories based on what you see. So again, looking at the impact, looking at the stories, looking at the numbers. And then the fifth one, which I should have put here, is communication. Being very aggressive about communicating your successes with the rest of the company to help it transform with you. So those are kind of the big things that I took away from the process. Again, as I mentioned, we're just 2 years in to a many year journey. We are a big global company, but the machine is moving. The numbers are very positive, and we're very excited about continuing this transformation.